Hey, my name is Raghav Kalyanaraman. I'm at Troop 25 in Plano, Texas, and today I just want to give you guys a little bit of information about the Blackland Prairie of Texas and how we can go about restoring it. First of all, the Blackland Prairie is an ecosystem and ecoregion in Texas. It used to one day spread over 12 million acres, and it consists of tall grasses and a wide variety of wildlife. It gets its name from the dark-colored soil, hence the name Blackland Prairie. But today, less than 1% of that remains. This is extending from the North Texas to San Antonio as depicted in the map. And before I go into why the Blackland Prairie has lost so much ground and what we can do to bring it back, I'll explain to you guys some history about the Blackland Prairie. Before, the bison were huge influencers and critical to the prairie's thriving and success. The bison would roam around in large herds, up to tens of thousands at a time. They would graze on the local grasses, and in the time they would stomp and crush small trees and shrubs on their path along their grazing trail, and this would not only make the soil more fertile, but it would prevent trees from growing and covering up the area with shade, as shade would be a problem to the prairie as they need direct sunlight at all times. And while these herds were moving so much, they would disperse and shallow planted seeds. And in addition, the herds, while they would overgraze the crop in their area, they would move around so frequently that the crop and the tall grasses would grow back quite quickly as well. This was until the European migrants came in the 1800s and the bison population fell quite significantly. In fact, they were almost hunted to extinction. The bison, the tall grasses, and occasional fires were all connected really strongly in a very vibrant and powerful and dynamic ecosystem. But it was shortly after that the European settlers came down and really adored and admired the prairie, as before they were used to all the forests in Europe. They've never seen such a land that was vast and filled with tall grasses and the majestic bison population. But they did also realize that the soil was extremely high quality and it was great for cultivation. And that is exactly what they used the prairie for, as they began to clear the prairie and start cultivating cash crops such as cotton and corn in large scales at a time. This would greatly deplete the nutrients of the soil, and as the farms were going on, new species of grasses were introduced for cattle farming. And we'll get into how these species really affect the Blackland Prairie today. But more recently, around the 20th century, urban development and suburban sprawl have been really reducing the prairie ecoregion. Encouraging smart growth policies for urban development to curb it and even reduce its impact on the prairie is critical for the continued success of it. Land protection laws and zoning would also help greatly with this problem, as housing and cities extend outward and outward on a daily basis. And we want to go into the true importance of the Blackland Prairie to the ecosystem in Texas today. First of all, the Blackland Prairie consists of a wide variety of tall grasses. The four most common ones are the Indian grass, big bluestem, little bluestem, and switchgrass. These all have long roots as shown in the image, and all of these long roots help prevent soil erosion as they're gripping on the dirt really tightly and very powerfully. In addition, these plants are quite well adapted to the Texas arid climate, and that's what makes them such a great plants for this area, as they're able to tap into the very deep groundwater during the summer months. And important to the humans is that the Blackland Prairie promotes rainwater infiltration, and this leads to increased yields of the watershed reservoir, which we use on a daily basis as well. And finally, the wildlife depend very greatly on the Blackland Prairie as well. Over 500 species of wildlife depend on this prairie, to be exact. And prairie birds are especially at risk because of the reducing prairie, as they are the ones that use the prairie for nests. And the specific plants that they use have certain adaptations and characteristics that the new plants do not have. Other animals, because of the loss of the prairie, many animals have either fragmented or drastically reduced in numbers, and in some rare situations, they have completely died out. The jaguar is just one example of a species that is now extinct in Texas because of the loss of the Blackland Prairie. The invasive species are a crucial factor in this, as birds, as I was mentioning, rely on the tall grasses which provide them a shelter. The birds nest in the crown of the tall grasses that form by the clumpy native grasses, and the invasive species that are now being that have been introduced into the area and are growing at a very fast rate, such as the Bermuda grass, do not provide such a shelter. And when birds try to use this shelter, they are often unable to and unsuccessful in the process. Secondly, the King Ranch bluestem is a very troublesome invasive plant that monopolizes nutrients and prevents other native plants from using the soil's nutrients. And this plant has been one that all parks and all wildlife organizations have been trying to mitigate in the past few years. Restoration process. So this is the actual process by which we can help by restoring the Blackland Prairie. First and foremost, we have to clear the land by mowing the entire tall grasses that are existing on the area that we were planning to restore. Second, raking the thatch in order to expose the soil is important so that the seeds can properly get into the ground and establish themselves. Third, of course, is spreading the seeds in a uniform fashion. And fourth is walking over them, just like the bison did, to mimic that they would establish the seeds at a shallow level. These types of seeds are supposed to be put at a shallow level, and that is how they best grow. For that reason, we would walk over them, and eventually, over time, they will start growing into becoming a tall grass prairie. But as they are growing, we must monitor the area for invasive species and tree erosions. As I mentioned before, trees cause shade, and shade is quite troublesome for prairie grass, as these types of grasses require sunshine and direct light at all times. And a sustained prairie vision that we need to keep in mind is after the seeds are allowed time to grow, periodic mowing should be taking place on a regular basis. Carefully using light herbicides can be used in the event of invasive species appearances, such as the King Ranch bluestem especially. Over time, we should see that the prairie will be able to reseed and establish a self-sustained community on its own. Animals will depend on it and thrive off of it. The only thing that we will need to do are routine controlled burns to mimic the forest fires that used to take place in the past. But what can we do right now to help the Blackland Prairie? The best way to help the Blackland Prairie right now and today is growing your own native grasses and wildflowers in a small section of your yard. It could be, for example, the big bluestem. Taking a small section of your yard and just dedicating it to growing these bluestem would really help the Blackland Prairie in a large way. Second, of course, is volunteering your time in reseeding and invasive species management projects, as both of those are critical to the continuance and sustainability of the Blackland Prairie. With that, I really want to thank you guys for your time, and I just encourage you guys to help save the prairies. Thank you.